Welcome everyone. My name is Kyle Hamada. I'm the Communications Director for Friends of the Inyo, and I want to welcome you to our virtual event, Birds of Owens Lake Changes and Trends. And I want to welcome Rich Cimino and Martin Powell, who will be our co-presenters today. I want to give them a big thank you for sharing all of this with us. And just to give you a brief overview of how the evening is going to go, I'm going to introduce Rich and he's going to take it from here. But before that, right after that, he's going to present for about 35 to 40 minutes. And then after that, we're going to take just a quick 5 to 10 minute break. You can refill your drink, you can use the restroom, and then come right back. And then I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Friends of the Inyo and the work that we do. And then immediately after that, we're going to get into a question and answer Q&A with Rich and with Martin, where you can ask them any questions that you may have. And from there, we will end up closing, and that'll be our evening. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rich Cimino. He was our keynote speaker for the 2019 Owens Lake Bird Festival, and Martin Powell, who is a Lone Pine local and a popular Owens Lake Bird Festival trip leader and a photographer. And together they're going to be sharing some incredible pictures and information about the birds with you. So without further ado, Rich, please go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Thank you. Well, gee, we have 140 some odd people signed up. So thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for taking the time this evening to see the presentation, to witness what Martin and I have put together. So we're using Martin's photos. Martin and I have done a lot of birding together, and he's a board member for Friends of the Inyo. And we tossed this around a little bit in different birding destinations, and here tonight it becomes a reality. So Owens Lake, the birds of Owens Lake, trends in the fall and wintering visiting species of the lake. It's a snapshot. It's not, 150 different species and that we're going to whale through in an hour and a half. We have a couple dozen species that we're going to look at. We're going to look at their frequency trends. We're going to match the trends up with the photos that Martin has supplied to the Zoom presentation. And we'll talk a little bit. Maybe we'll have some pearls about the individual birds and about the lake itself. So one of the most important messages tonight is that Owens Lake in 2018 was designated a Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network partner. So it has special recognition in the ornithology world and in the ecosystem biologists that are looking at global warming through the Great Basin and other areas that service wintering stops and summering stops for migrating birds from the Arctic and the tundra, maybe from Asia, coming into the Western Hemisphere through Alaska and British Columbia, Alberta, down into the lower 48 through Central America and then into South America. There we go. So how did we get here? So this is myself and the couple behind me, Nancy and Mike Prather. Mike and I had worked a number of years ago on wilderness boundary surveys for proposing new wildernesses in the Sierra Nevada through the Sierra Club. And we just, we met 2 or 3 times and communicated on email. And I started a bird touring company in the late 90s, and Mike and Nancy graced the Yellow-billed tours and went up to Nome with us. And they've been to France with us and a couple other, Wisconsin, et cetera, a number of places with us. And along the way, on the trip to Nome, they introduced me to Martin. Martin is the tall fellow back there with the brown cap and the off-color brown sweatshirt there. And that's how I met Martin. And from that, we just created this friendship and around birding. And here's Martin and I together in Costa Rica. We've been to Belize together also. So how does all this come together? Nome, Alaska, Belize, Inyo County, Lone Pine, Owens Lake, Marin County. That's where I'm speaking from tonight. This is where I live. So I've always felt for years, 30, 40 years that I've been birding and leading trips for Audubon and then my own field guide touring business, that birding has a real social component, that we meet a lot of really nice, great people that we just form friendships with through birding. We're typically like-minded thinkers. For sure, we like to travel, and we like to travel far distances and birding. And some of us like to chase rare birds, birds that are lost, individual birds. Some of us are county birders. Some of us are backyard birders. Some of us have, wonderful backyard birding opportunities. But the real message is that birding has a real social component. And that led me into a friendship with Martin and into tonight's presentation. So here's a good snapshot of Inyo County. It's about 2 weeks old. This is a Martin Powell photo. Sierra Nevada, as you can see it, all the way down towards Independence, maybe even as far as Bishop. I'm not sure how many miles that is. Alabama foothills in the foreground, and then of course Owens Lake in front of us. So as I mentioned a moment ago, this is about 2 weeks old, and you can see the water, shallow water in the lake. You see the beaches and some different type of soil types. You have some maybe alkali over here and sand and gravel here. And this is one of the reasons why we get so many of the migrating species into Inyo County, Owens Lake. So this is just an Audubon map that I pilferaged and use it tonight as a little tool. So here we are, for sure, Owens Lake. And this is the main focus for us tonight. But a lot of these species on this particular map that was out there was ruddy duck and western sandpiper and ibises. You can see the corresponding color and they show going into Southern California, but they also come into Owens Lake. And quite a few come into Owens Lake. When you, as we go through the presentation tonight, we'll look at some of the eBird charts for frequency, and I may have some counts on the larger numbers. But so moving forward, you can see that some of the birds that we get come in from British Columbia. They probably maybe into the high tundra, maybe Nome, maybe Barrel, maybe Russia. Slaty-back gull, maybe from slaty-back gull from Japan. We don't know. Haven't had that bird yet, but just as a little teaser. And then we have birds coming in from British Columbia, as I mentioned, and we have Alberta, and then we have Saskatchewan and Manitoba, all the provinces of Canada, and they find their way into Southern California, Owens Lake. So one of the big topics that I've discovered several years ago, maybe even longer than that, is the Owens River. The Owens River runs about 180 miles and it terminates in Owens Lake. And the key thing that I focused on for a number of presentations about the Eastern Sierras is the Owens River. Traveling 180 miles, collecting water from the Sierra Nevada, the White Mountains and the Inyo Mountains, builds a lot of nutrients. And as I mentioned just a second ago, the Owens River terminates in Owens Lake. And with the sun and the atmosphere exposure and all the nutrients that are drained from the wet meadows, the pastures, the cow dung, if you will, creates this biomass. And biomass feeds like brine flies and shrimp, other crustaceans, as well as many of our shorebirds feed on this. Number of the peeps, least sandpiper, right here. Least sandpipers come in numbers. We've had some pretty high counts, up to 2,000, 2,500 that are shown. So they feed along the shore. As you know, they have these short legs. I'll come back to that graph in a minute. You can see the zone that they feed in, maybe an inch of water, maybe a little bit less, and probing into the mud for all these worms and crustaceans, maybe even eating some flies that are caught in the water. So what we did tonight, what we're going to do tonight on a number of species, we're using eBird frequency charts. I use the eBird Explorer app, and so if you're not used to eBird and the Explorer app, you can type in whatever location you want and scroll down and find the species that you're interested in. And there's a couple icons to the right, and you can explore those icons that you click on. And one of them will lead you into this particular app that's part of the overall Explorer. So this shows us by month, January to December, full 12 months. And this gives us a really good snapshot of least sandpipers. So least sandpipers nest all the way up in the tundra. They're in Barrel, they're in Nome, they're in just the tundra as far east and far west into Asia. Of course, in Asia, we get stints, right? Little stint and redneck stint, etc. But they're all part of the peep family. And so tonight we're going to look what happens from their return from their nesting breeding grounds in the Arctic and follow them into the spring when they leave again. So fall migration typically starts really about July sometime, where we got some early reports of some birds returning in late June, but you can see how they start to build up if you can follow my cursor across the bar chart here. In August, we start to get some pretty big numbers. So there has been some studies done, and what happens, the reports, the studies, the results have shown that the juveniles and females leave the breeding grounds early, and they come into California and probably go a little bit further south into Baja, and then the males return, and the males stay in California. And the theory is the males stay closer to the breeding grounds because they leave earlier in the spring, and we'll see that here in those months. So the males congregate, they stay the winter in Owens Lake area. There may be females also, and there may be juveniles. There's always those exceptions and variances. But back to the fact that they leave earlier to go to the Arctic and the tundra so they can get the best nesting spots. So when the females arrive in the May timeframe, April-May timeframe, the males feel they have the best breeding spots, and they go into their displays and attract their mates, and they're on site early, picking those sites. And then the females, the minute they find the male that's suitable and has done a good job on picking a site, they get right down into it. And as you can see, middle May all the way into June, there are no least sandpipers in Owens Lake. They're all either on their way up through migration or already on the breeding sites. So we go through December and a little fast forward. And here we are in January. We're still getting some pretty good numbers. There's a void here in February. Either birders weren't out or they were out and they didn't report what they saw. Really thin in March, but they start to build up again in April. And I won't take you through that whole scenario again, but in April, they start going north. Here's least sandpipers. All these photos, once again, are Martins. Here's a really good shot. I blew it up as far as I could without taking up that whole border. But you can see the least sandpipers. First thing you want to go for is those orange legs. These are nice and clean. A lot of time you're looking at them and they're just stuck with mud and you don't know if they're black or orange. And a little bit of a droopy bill, not too long. We'll see Western sandpiper in a minute with a longer bill. The white rump and flanks and that thin wing bar. And what we have here is a classic photo of least sandpipers in flight, looking really good too. Now, we can come back to this. Why doesn't everyone put in chat how many birds you're seeing here? And Kyle can go through that and tell us how many people have it correct. We won't spend, I'll count to 10. How many birds in this photo? 10. Western sandpiper. This is a classic Western sandpiper. This photo was taken on April 20th of 2020. So it's a spring male getting ready to go north, and total different plumage than the least. Look at that longer bill, a little bit droopy here, but pretty straight. Look at these black legs. And of course, one of the key markers that I always look for, this is a little intuitive, but it works, is the chevrons. You won't see that on a breeding plumage least sandpiper. And then of course, up here in the scapulars, you get these nice chestnut colors. And of course, the chestnut spot on the back cheek behind the lower and on the crown and nape. That's just a classic photo of a Western sandpiper. Okay,
Can you go back to that picture? How many birds were there? We've got 3, we've got 6, and we've got a few outliers, but give us the answer.
3. So when Martin took this is a reflection. These 3 birds are a reflection off of Owens Lake. So 3 real birds and 3 decoys, faux birds. So there's a total of 3 birds. 3 live.
Great photo, Martin. Thank you.
Yeah, sort of cool. Western sandpiper. So a little different scenario here on the distribution. Once again, we'll use this bar chart, but I think after 1 or 2 or 3 of these, you'll get used to looking at it on your own. I don't want to bore you, but you can see how the Western sandpipers start to come in that same time frame as the lease. And then they fall off a little bit. And this may be to some of the females leaving, going further south. Maybe the males follow them. There are some voids here that birds weren't seen or birders were out and didn't record them. But you can see that trend. They're here from July into April. This shows May. Those birds may have been really late. They may have been juvenile birds, new birds that didn't get into the flyway quick enough. But so these charts here are frequencies and how often we see them. They have nothing to do with volume. The high counts here, if we were able to do that, but we don't want to do that, do we? Because that puts us into Dunlins. If you go into eBird and go into the Explorer app where I did these cut and paste downloads, you can go into birds per hour, abundance, high counts, totals, average counts, and that'll give you a snapshot of what's happening in the lake as far as volumes go, if that's what interests you. But you can see here in August, September, the Western sandpiper really peaks and stays around for a good period of time. This represents a lot of inputs from birders. One of the things I noticed in doing the presentation is for Inyo County on eBird, there's 49,000 checklists for Inyo County. I find that incredible. So there's a lot of birders coming up from LA, probably Ventura County, people from the Bay Area, from the 9 San Francisco Bay Area counties. I know a lot of folks that, including myself, that get to Owens Lake maybe 2 times a year. We get birding there. So there's a lot of input of citizen science type input. And that's what these charts are showing us, of people that care about the lake and have developed an interest in it with birds, and it tells us the health of the lake. This is a Dunlin. This is another shorebird that uses Owens Lake in the fall through the winter months and into the spring. They're a little bit bigger bird. They're about 3 times the weight of a least sandpiper. I think these are like 60 grams, and I believe the least sandpiper is like 20. And that's an interesting little fun fact. When you're looking at bird size, Sibley's gives the weight. And if you're not quite sure, with peeps, look at the weight. So Sibley shows the least sandpiper at 20 grams. I believe it shows the Western sandpiper like 39 to 40. And then the Dunlin, which is a bigger bird, is 3 times the weight. And the size differences, I believe the least sandpiper is about 6 inches, Western 6.5, Dunlin's like 7.5. Excuse me, a Baird is 7.5. The Dunlin has a long tail. It's a longer migrant bird. They come in from Russia. The other interesting fun fact on Dunlins is they wait around on the breeding grounds or areas nearby and do their molt before they migrate. Other birds get into Owens Lake and do a molt once they reached here. So Dunlin's an interesting bird and should always be looked for. This is a great photo. Longer bills, droopier bills. Dunlins are very gray-brown in the fall, and they don't arrive. Let's get to the map here. They don't arrive in great numbers until maybe September. That's an outlier bird, but looks like a couple people reported on it. It's a pretty thick marker there, but as you can see, they start to come into the Western Hemisphere, the lower 48 in September, October. We get another big bust in November, and then they sort of peter out, and then here you go. Here's that spike again, getting ready for that spring migration. They have a long migration. They go all the way up into Russia. The Pribilofs, a lot, probably Gamble. I don't recall seeing them in Gamble. They may be in Gamble with rock sandpipers, but basically you can see how they come back. Here's the frequency in the fall months. This is into December. A little bit less in January through February, and then all at once they spike. So in this is another great photo that Martin's taken on the lake, and it's shorebirds flocking. There's some least in here. There's some westerns. There's some Dunlin in here. It's a really good photo. It's in the spring of 2019, I believe. Martin, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, it was given within a week of the late April Bird Festival, and this was out on the east side of the lake. And as a representation, this was probably only 10% of the flock because I use a pretty deep zoom. So there was a huge amount of birds. I've never seen a shorebird mass like this in my life. So,
yeah. There are reports of some of these flocks being up to 4,000 birds and more. When they get up in the air like this, it's, you count by 500s practically, or nothing less than 100 in a square inch, and you keep going. So some of the interesting things about these synchronized flights of the shorebirds, of course, the common knowledge that's been around for a long time is a predator, whether it be a merlin or peregrine falcon or maybe a harrier, or any large bird. So I've seen them get flushed by turkey vultures with the shadow of a turkey vulture on a mud flat, and they'll get up. The other interesting things that are being written about the synchronized flights is they may be signaling to other birds that they found a good feeding area. They found a good mud flat that has a good outbreak of worms or clams or other crustaceans or flies, shrimp, and they're signaling to other birds. There's a possibility that happens. Also, in the later evening, they may be signaling that they have a safe, secure roost spot to spend the evening. So they're signaling to other birds in other parts of the lake to come and join them. And then more recently, there's been some reports that papers, if you do some web search on this, that they come together for warmth. They get these large groups and they huddle in, and we've seen that, of course, along the coast on piers and docks and in early mornings, if you're off on the beaches, that a lot of shorebirds come together really close, and that is a feature of staying warm in cold environments. So great photo, Martin, thank you. Whoa, look at that. So that's one of the reasons why these shorebirds come, the mystery of the merlin, right? The mysterious merlin. And so, when a merlin's around, he's going to raise those birds. He's a bully. He's going to harass them. He's going to shuffle them around. And he doesn't do that for fun. He's not a bully without intention. He's looking for the weak one. He's looking for that one bird, either an inexperienced bird or an older bird. And he rustles these large flocks of shorebirds, and he tries to see which one. He's constantly, I'm calling it it is searching for one of the birds that just isn't keeping up. And if he can, he'll split that single bird off, and he'll do everything to just force it to keep flying until it's exhausted. It may land, or he may catch it and just take it there, and that would be his dinner. This is a beautiful photo of a merlin. So what do we have with merlins? Merlins they follow the shorebirds. Look at this chart. They start to come in September, and they stick around all the way till, guess what? Spring migration. And once those shorebirds start to leave, they're not around. So they follow the shorebirds through the migration period. So they're not here basically middle April until September. So I was sort of curious about this large void. I was wondering how many merlins come down. And one of the neat things about eBird, if you're really curious and you want to peel the onion back, you can get a lot of data. You just have to keep clicking, and every click creates another level of adventure, you might say. And this last year, actually between 2015 and 2021, well, 2021 is just beginning. So 2015 through 2020, the abundance of Merlins has been one per year. There isn't like one on the East Shore, one on the West Shore, one working the Delta, one working, further south. There isn't like 4 birds in 4 sections. There's just been one Merlin reported. And it's been reported by a number of birders. You can see the spikes here on the frequency and how often it's been reported. So Merlin's an interesting bird in Owens Lake. Well, there's enough for everyone to eat, including peregrine falcon. You want to talk about this photo at all, Martin? This is a great photo. Oh, you're on mute, Martin.
Trying to be, nothing special about the photo. I would prefer to have it flying towards me, but we don't get to choose. So I think there's 2 other peregrine photos in Rich's show. So let's go on to that.
Okay, so this is a great bird, very dark. Look at these wide wings at the body. This bird, oopsie days, I just gave my show away. Long pointy wings, right? We all know that, and that facial mask, huh? And that iris around the yellow iris, and look at the bill with the yellow. Very easy to spot in the air. Just those long pointy wings. But this bird is inches off of Owens Lake. What in the world is he after? Oh, Lord, look at him. He's moving fast. And these big, deep wing beats. Very exciting. And coots. Now, coots is one of the most abundant birds on the lake in the fall. Up to 6,000 coots have been reported. And this one is on ice. And so, a peregrine falcon flying a couple inches off the deck, sort of like a combat fighter plane trying to land on an aircraft carrier. He's zooming in. And so what's he going to do here? This this peregrine falcon, Martin thinks it has what in its talons, Martin?
I think it's either a yellow-headed blackbird juvenile or just a blackbird.
So that's an interesting photo. Once again, just some bird ID properties. Look at the width of these wings. Look at the feathering underneath. Look at the talons. This is like, this bird it's not going anywhere. You can see a little bit of the bill if we blew it up more, and there's the facial pattern. Just an excellent photo of peregrine falcon feeding in the air. So peregrine falcon, they're here in Owens Lake just about year round. They take a dip, in this period again when the shorebirds are gone, but they start to come back. They follow shorebirds. There are probably some resident birds because of all of the mountains around. They can nest on ledges in outcroppings. And and there's plenty of food on the lake for the most part, except maybe during the summer. And they find themselves either going south to Sea Cortez or going west to the Pacific or other lakes that may have more waterfowl. Oh, an interesting fun fact on peregrine falcons is since I was looking at Merlins and discovered that there's only been 1 a year reported on the lake, using the lake as a wintering grounds. There's up to 4 peregrine falcons using the lake throughout the year. So that's pretty interesting. Martin, have you seen a juvenile peregrine falcon or all adults?
I've only seen adults.
Okay. American bald eagle. So what we're finding out about American bald eagle in California is that they're starting to take residency around their territories, their breeding territories, and they're staying more and more in these territories throughout the year. Here's a hatchier bird, a juvenile bald eagle on the lake taking a ruddy duck.
Ruddy duck.
And when was this taken? October, November?
It was taken in January, Rich.
January. Oh, so 2021, brand new photo, yep. Brand new bird.
Yep.
Interesting. So go back here. So bald eagles take anywhere from 4 to 5 years to get into their adult plumage. And of course, once they're in adult plumage, they're easy to recognize. This bird here is the same bird here in flight, oversized head. Whoop, excuse me. Richard, go back. Harrier, giving myself up here. This is the same bird. Look at that oversized bill, big head. Look at the width of these wings. They move a lot of air. They can really travel fast and far. It's a beautiful photo. Might be the best photo ever of a hatchier juvenile bald eagle. Great photo. So here's their abundance chart for the lake. And once again, there they are. See, that whole migration period, unless there's some coots that stick around, and they will eat coots. And they'll eat carrion, they'll eat roadkill. They'll still, you know, if there's a osprey around in one of the mountain lakes, and they'll still fish from them. So the abundance here is significant, and they stay throughout the year. Northern Harrier, huh? Isn't this is a great photo with that conspicuous white rump. And I like this. Martin and I were reviewing the photo, and we both sort of seized on this at the same time, that white color that goes behind the nape down into the upper chin, that owl type face, that yellow eye, just a really terrific bird. So what do we know about Northern Harriers in Owens Lake? We know they're abundant in the fall, and they stay through the spring. And then they fall off, but they don't really leave. And they're seen throughout, as you can see here on the map, they're found 12 months out of the year around Owens Lake. So they're a ground nester, right? I think everyone knows that. Harriers are in the wetlands, they're in meadows, and there might be in ranch pasture lands, catching a mouse with all the cow dung and everything else running around. You don't know what's on the ground there. They obviously get insects. They get sick and tired old birds that they'll take. They might even take other nesting birds out of a nest, sparrows and what have you. But in this period, they start to disappear because we don't see them on the lake. As I just mentioned, they're more in the wetlands, meadows, and pastures, nesting on their own. A male harrier may have up to 3 partners, 3 females that he services and feeds and takes care of, bringing food to all of the young. So he's a really, really busy guy. And yes, Martin.
Hey, Rich, one of our guests pointed out that was a picture of a female harrier. You want to talk about the difference in colors between male, female?
Yeah, let's go back. So if this were a male, he'd be gray and more white underneath. So this is a female, I agree 100%. And this one here is going through a molt. It's missing a feather. Some of these feathers are worn. You can see some stuff going on here. Do you recall the date of this photo?
I think that was in December.
Yeah. So this bird's been exposed to the elements, the sun, winter, rain, probably snow, freezing temperatures, and you can see the wear on the feathers. It is an excellent photo of female. Yeah. One of the world's best photos of a Cooper's hawk. And want to talk about this one a little bit, Martin? Where'd you get this photo?
Not on the Owens Lake. This was in my front yard. And this bird has been harassing the quail and the white-crowned sparrows around my yard, and is still here to this day. I saw this bird or another Cooper's bust a whole flock of birds on my back lawn this morning about 7:30. So he has found a good food source. He or she's going to stick around a bit. And yeah, I just got super fortunate. I slowly opened the front door and shot this picture.
Wow. So if you recall the beginning of the presentation, Martin is a lifelong resident of Lone Pine, so which leads us into the Cooper's hawk. So Cooper's hawk is really a accipiter of the forest, but it really likes forest edges. It likes to see the landscape. It likes to have a clear vision of what's in front of it. And it's also an urban bird. both towns like small communities such as Lone Pine and large urban communities. In Northern California, there's been a big explosion in studies done in Oakland area, Alameda County, Contra Costa County on population trends in the urban areas of the Cooper's Hawks. So what do we have here for trends? So we see it year round, okay, because it has adapted into urban areas, areas of townships and counties with, population. So it's not like a goshawk, you're not going to just see this bird in a thick forest. It's not a wilderness bird per se. And so what do we have? We have this big trend that starts in August. What do you think that means? We'll just look at that. It's a big trend. And of course, here it sort of drops off. So it's coming in with the migrating songbirds, all of the western tanagers and phoebes and the various flycatchers and kingbirds and woodhouse jays, if there's woodhouse jays there. I don't know if you have woodhouse jays or California scrub jays, but regardless, so the big spike in the Cooper's Hawks happens in the fall, and when they're following that fall migration of songbirds heading to Central America, South America, sort of drops off. They sort of hang out around Martin's backyard here, having a meal every other day of a white-crowned sparrow and maybe whatever, maybe a Harris's sparrow. You got to check for Harris's sparrow in that backyard, Martin. Just teasing. Whoa, look at this. So if you recall, several minutes ago, I indicated that using eBird, up to 4 peregrine falcons have been recorded in the same time frame on Owens Lake. Here's 2 together. What's the elevation here? Is this just a road berm, or is this a cliff?
Yeah, this is over by T29, which is close to Keeler, or the main haul road. And they were just sitting on a road, and they let me drive within about probably 100 feet of them. And I slowly creeped up. I didn't even get out of the truck. I just leaned out and shot this picture without ever leaving the truck. So
wow, isn't birding fun?
Yep.
Yeah, it just is. Whoa, here we go. So the lake has up to 12 species of ducks that use Owens Lakes from October to April. In an effort to not bore everyone to death and have this go for an hour and a half, I just listed them here. I think most of us, from beginner birders to way advanced birders and biologists and professional people involved in the natural world, we once again, even beginning birders, former hunters are great birders. We can't exclude them, but cinnamon teal, green-winged teal, blue-winged teal, northern shoveler, pintail, gadwall, the mallards, of course, American widgeon, ring-necked duck, redhead, bufflehead, and lesser scaup. So I went online looking for a map that might tell me just about where all the ducks, the different duck species nest, where they breed, and about what their migration into the lower 48 look like. So this is a composite of 12 species of ducks. And for instance, up here, you might get widgeon, you might get shovelers and pintails. In Nome, for sure, you get widgeon, shovelers, pintails, excuse me. And you can see the brown here, breeding. Some birds stay in the pothole prairies of Canada. Here's Manitoba, Saskatchewan, here's Alberta, British Columbia. You can see a lot of pothole habitat. And of course, the Dakotas, parts of Minnesota, down into Nebraska, into the Flint Hills, where all the sandhill cranes along the Platte River come. Wyoming has a fair share. It's in their pothole, but Montana with their grasslands, and even a tad of Idaho, Washington. And then look at these large non-breeding areas across the United States for all these ducks, and down into Central America, down into the Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, Honduras, all of the countries there. So this gives you a good snapshot. And then here we are, we're right here. And so we get up to 12, maybe even more. I counted 12 different species of duck using the lakes. And of course, that's fair game for peregrine falcons, for possibly a harrier to take one. Bald eagles will take one. They take the coots. So there's a lot of food source for the raptors. So Owens Lake is a good raptor fall wintering birding location. Here's a great photo of a bufflehead. They use the lake in reasonable volumes. There's been up to 2,500 recorded. Northern shovelers is the largest volume duck that uses Owens Lake, with flocks of up to 25,000 have been reported. Northern shovelers. Ruddy ducks, not so much, but this was a great photo. Ruddy duck, just a bluebill, as the hunters call them. American widgeon uses the lake, also not quite like the northern shovelers, but groups of 1,000 have been reported. And so this is a widgeon breeding map, if you will. Of course, there's Greenland, and here's Alaska. A lot of lakes, a lot of rivers, a lot of ponds for them to feed in, and all through here down into the lower 48. And in migration, look at this. The reason I chose this map, so we got all this breeding area, and look at our western population, how they come into Owens Lake in the Inyo Valley, Inyo County. I think that's pretty incredible. And some stay year round. We have some here in the Bay Area, but Owens Lake has a big migration path through the county and into Southern California. Whoa, snow goose. Snow goose is an interesting one. Martin has quite a few good photos. I picked this one because they're in flight and we can look at the features of the birds. But snow goose is really interesting because look at where they nest. Here's Greenland. You have all of these islands of Canada. Here, Great Slave Lake, Hudson Bay and through here. And look at their migration range. And they just come all over. So we have two different populations of the snow goose. We have the Atlantic population, I believe that's called the greater snow goose, this population here. And this population that uses the Mississippi Flyway down through Texas and the Caribbean coast of Mexico. And then our population that we have here is that we have in the Central Valley, Washington, Oregon, and here this map should come up a little bit. I think we, oops, can talk about that later. But that's an interesting look at that. Migration is over 4,000 miles if we're getting birds from here all the way into Owens Lake. And what we see there is, look at this. They don't get here into Owens Lake until the fall, late fall, October, the first birds start to show up. First group is, must have been a pretty good sized group. A lot of birders saw it, so we have a pretty good block, and then they weren't reported, but then they started popping up with regularity. Some of this may be just lack of birders out in the field, but they stay with us until April. So early April, late March, as you can see from the graph below, that they're gone because they have a long 4,000 mile migration back north to their breeding grounds. So the trend of this bird using Owens Lake is quite interesting. This is known as the lesser snow goose. And Owens Lake has its legends of terns and gulls. Here's our Caspian tern. They nest in the Great Basin, but just a great photo. I don't know how many birders see it, but we know they're active in the March through October timeframe, a different breeding cycle, migration cycle coming into Owens Lake during the breeding season, and then they're gone in the cold periods. They might be off on the coast. So this is an interesting bird to pay attention to when you're birding Owens Lake looking for the Caspian tern. What about this guy? Little gull. What month was this taken, Martin?
September of 2020.
So little gull. Interesting bird, beautiful plumage. Little bill, look at that, just hawking insects off the water. Sort of like a black tern feeding. I'm really curious about this bird. So this bird has a really oddball, I shouldn't say that. That's not nice. This bird has some really interesting breeding grounds in the Great Lakes of the Midwest. Here's Lake Michigan. Here's a little breeding patch in Door County, Wisconsin, which would be Green Bay. Lake Erie. Here's Lake Erie, Lake Huron, and Lake Ontario. This is their breeding area. There's a little spot here in Minnesota and probably the prairies. And then the population, for the most part, non-breeding in the winter and fall along the Atlantic coast, but then some pop up probably through using the Mississippi Flyway. Small numbers pop up in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Houston, Galveston area. So I was just curious, and I just drew this line. Let's assume that this bird found its way into Houston, and there was no electricity, there was no heat, and if you had an electric car, you couldn't start it. And it said, "I'm going to California." That wasn't fair, was it? I hope no one from Texas is watching. It was humor. Anyhow, this bird, if it left Houston and flew to Lone Pine, that's 1,700 miles. And this is the first time this bird has been observed and photographed on Owens Lake in Inyo County. So a nonstop auto trip would take 23 hours. So it's fair to assume that this little gull took weeks, maybe months to reach Owens Lake. And here's the bird in flight. Look at those wing patterns. Isn't that spectacular? Look at the tail and the whole body. And then these trailing edges with some black integrated and a really black leading edge on the wings. Look at that, the crown, white collar, little tiny dainty bill for hawking insects. Beautiful photo, Martin. How long did you watch the bird for? Minutes, hours?
No, it was pretty active for a fair amount of time. I think close to an hour. I saw it when I first drove out on the lake. It was, that first picture. So it was sitting on the water, and then John Dunn showed up, and it flew a bit, and then so he got some good looks. Yeah, we observed the bird for over half an hour before it moved on. So.
So let's look at the frequency of this bird in Owens Lake. The only time it's been sighted, and there it is. It was around for maybe reported for a week and a half. It hung out, and I don't know how many birders got to see it. I have a little story that goes with it. So Martin and I communicate quite a bit, and I'm also on a listserv called Cowbirds. And that came through that there was a little gull on Owens Lake, and I don't know, maybe 10 minutes after I got the posting, Martin called and said, "I got this bird, I'm sending you the photo," and a little gull. It was really interesting. This modern age we live in with listservs and social media and, paparazzi of birds. That bird did not go undetected. And great photos, Martin. So another interesting bird is the Sabin's gull, and you can see where they nest. They nest in the high Arctic. This be Beryl, Alaska, and here's Nome, Alaska. So we see them in Nome, and they're in the breeding season. They're a grassland bird. They nest not far from the shorelines in the short tundra and grasses, sand dune grasses, that type of thing is where you see them. And you see them offshore quite a bit. They fly in their flocks. They don't mingle with the other gulls. You won't see them with, for instance, glaucous wing or glaucous gulls or mew gulls. They just stay apart. And then once they breed, they become a pelagic gull. And that's what happens out here. This is the Pacific. This is the Bering Sea here. They find their way down. So if you go on a pelagic trip out of San Diego or Los Angeles or Ventura or the Bay Area or Monterey, you're in the fall, you're liable to see the Sabin's gull. And there's been quite a few records. I think there's 51 checklists that have Sabin's gull on the Owens Lake that have been reported. And as you can see, they start to come in August. They go through that migration pattern, like the shorebirds and other birds. And they hit us, and then all at once they disappear. And I think they come back and they're more of a pelagic bird. These may be juveniles, maybe there's a little off track, or maybe they came over the continent and not on the pelagic side. But there have been a number of records. And if you ever see a gull with a black head and that little tip bill, you know, you want to think Franklin's gull, maybe from Nevada, or Wyoming, Oregon, but you want to look at this plumage here, and on the primaries, that's slate gray. And you want to go into the windows on the tail, and you might have yourself a Sabin's gull on Owens Lake. They've been there enough. Here's the chart again. Whoa, Owens Lake. So we started with the Owens River and how it feeds the lake and all the nutritional value that the river carries in from the Inyo Mountains and the White Mountains, Sierra Nevada, as those mountains and their melting snow and rain and all come through the tributaries, the little creeks and meandering sloughs and wetlands, and it all ends up here in Owens Lake. And Owens Lake is really coming back. There's been a lot of efforts by conservationists, years of work, intense work, and just negotiating with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And here you can see a couple different type of habitats. Everything can be used by birds of different sorts. So in doing the research for tonight's presentation, once again, through using eBird, there is something like 400, and I'm going to cheat for a minute and look at my card, 426 species in Inyo County. And the biggest bulk of them are in and around the lake, and the highest volume of the birds are on the lake. So let's take a step back. 49,000 checklists submitted to eBird, 426 species. Birds using the lake because it's being rewatered and it's becoming the ecosystem that it once was again, slowly, but it's happening through the persistence of conservationists and organizations like Friends of the Inyo. Go back for a minute, and Owens Lake as we see it, and why birds use it during the fall migration, spring resting, and building up their fat to make their long flights back to breeding grounds. And this is where they go. This is the tundra and the wetlands outside of Nome, Alaska. And it's very similar. This is off of an airplane, of course. The other one was on shore. So a little different dynamics there, but you get the message. This is their breeding grounds. This is where they've come from, and this is where they go back to each spring. Go back here. So Friends of the Inyo, volunteers, the professional staffs of all the agencies, everyone working to really make Owens Lake that ecosystem, bring it back, bring the birds back, bring back tourism, right? We need an economy, we have to exist. It is 2021. So I'd like to thank the following folks: local photographer, birder buddy, Martin Powell, peer review by my partner, Janet Bodo. The following organizations, I can't give enough credit to Friends of the Inyo. I use the Western Migratory Shorebird Project.org, their website, to gather data. Cornell University has their All About Birds org. That's a wonderful site if you're curious about having little fun facts about birds. North American Birds, their website. The eBird Explorer app that you saw, I used for just about each species. Is got so much data, and you can spend an evening just clicking away there. Sibley Birds, their second edition, great field guide. And I also love the National Geographic Field Guide, the 7th edition, which has a lot of new range maps. And just a real, so Sibley is different than National Geographic in some areas. One is it shows bird weights, the weight of the birds. And I use that sometimes to sort of help me identify what I'm looking at. But both field guides are excellent. There's other excellent field guides also, and I don't mean to take from any of them. So thank you for everyone. And this is what I do for a living. I have a little company, tour guide, small group size, never more than 6 people, Yellow Bill Tours. And you can look me up on the web. It's really easy, yellowbilltours.com. And this schedule is 2021 in 2022. We do about the same trips each year. We might add Europe sometimes. We do southern France and Italy. But for the most part, we're North American. And I want to thank Kyle, my buddy over there from Lone Pine. He spent so much time. We had 3 dry runs, everyone, to make sure that this went really well and that we knew what we were dealing with. And that when we fired up tonight, we weren't going to have any technical issues. So thank you, Kyle, for holding our hand through all of this. You've been great. Thank you, Martin, for your great photography and quick finger. That finger, man, you get some great shots. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. That was a great presentation. And thank you, Martin, for sharing all those photos with us. Now, before anyone wants to leave, let's give it 5 minutes. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. Go ahead, relax, maybe stretch, walk around. And then we're gonna come back and get right into a Q&A. I also want to just give a little teaser that we are planning an Owens Lake Bird Festival, which typically we do have in-person events and dozens of outings. Now this year is of course a little bit different, but we are going to have an Owens Lake Bird Festival and it's going to be completely virtual. And we're going to give some more information about that later too. So please stick around. I'm going to take 5 minutes exactly. I've started my timer and then we're going to come back. So we will see you in just 5 minutes. Thank you. All right. I'm going to call time is up. Let's have everyone go ahead and join us if you haven't already. And Rich and Martin, are you ready to get into actually before we get into some Q&As, I just want to talk a little bit about Friends of the Inyo. And it sounds like most of us here maybe have heard of Friends of the Inyo or is familiar with what Friends of the Inyo does. Like I said, I'm Kyle Hamada. I'm the communications director for Friends of the Inyo. We are an environmental nonprofit based in Bishop, California. Our mission is to protect and care for the Eastern Sierra and the Eastern Sierra's public lands. And we do that through several different ways. One of them is education. So we take kids out and we take adults out and we teach them why a healthy environment is important. We teach leave no trace principles. We also engage in stewardship, and that means picking up trash or maintaining trails, clearing fire rings, things like that. And we also engage in policy advocacy, where we engage with local management agencies and local partners to make sure that actions and development on the public lands of the Eastern Sierra are appropriate and that it won't harm any of the ecosystem or any of the critters that we love. So that's it about Friends of the Inyo. I won't take up too much of your time. Go ahead and go to our website at friendsoftheinyo.org and you can learn more about the work that we do. But we're glad to have you joining us and we'll get back to the program here. So, all right, now Rich and Martin, we'll get into some questions, all right?
Okay.
Now, let's see, one of the first questions that came in, and Martin, you did answer this in the chat box, but can you tell us a little bit about the gear that you shoot with?
When I first started with, because I've been a bird photographer for about 9 years, I was shooting Canon D7 Mark II when it became available, paired with Sigma 150 600 telephoto. And I liked that because it had a lot of reach, and because of the crop factor, it made the 600 millimeters 960 millimeters. So it really reaches out there. Recently, back in November, I finally acquired the new Canon mirrorless R5, and I paired that with the new mirrorless 800 millimeter f11 fixed. And that has a fair amount of reach also, and it is definitely a lighter unit to carry around. So I'm really finding that I like the lightness of the rig. Shoots really fast if you want to. You can shoot with or without the electronic shutter. So lots of good things coming from that, and it's twice the megapixels of the D7. So the D7 was 22 megapixels. The R5 is 45 megapixels. So when you crop, you still have quite a bit of information. That's the short answer.
That was a very good, very dense, answer. I'm just going to make sure we got our folks here on mute. And sorry, 1 second. Yeah, very dense answer. Martin, if folks just have maybe a point and shoot or a camera phone, can they still go out on the lake and try to get some nice pictures? By the way, I muted you in case you hadn't noticed.
Point and shoot, yes, if you've got a decent zoom, I would say if you can zoom 400 or 500 millimeters, that would be the starting point for capturing decent images. Cell phones, great for landscapes, not really good for birds. That's my opinion. So.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Martin. All right, let's pass the question over to you, Rich, which I also put you on mute, by the way, so you're gonna have to come off of mute. But do ibis or cranes visit Owens Lake in Inyo County?
I beg your pardon?
Do ibis or cranes visit Owens Lake in Inyo County?
Oh, for sure. White-faced ibis in volume. Yes. Yeah. This is their type of breeding habitat. And of course they breed to the further north also and to the further east. But yes, you can find them in the summer. They're, Martin had some good photos on those. I chose not to use them.
A flock of ibis would be somewhere between 50 and 30 when they are out on the lake, Kyle.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. A question for both of you, maybe, but can you tell us a little bit about? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to this question. Rich, how do you define a peep?
A peep?
A peep.
Well, I would define a peep first by habitat. It would be along, for instance, on the picture of Owens Lake, it would be in this area here. And there are a number of different peeps. If you go to your field guides, we'll start with the least sandpiper, and it's probably gonna be feeding closer to the shore. It has shorter legs. Western sandpiper, it's direct cousin, maybe feeds in the same zone. But then you get the Dunlin and you get the Bairds and you get the pectoral sandpipers, and those are longer legged birds, and they'll be out pecking in the mud. There's been some recent papers, if you like reading scientific papers and staying up what's going on, that their tongues are serrated and they're darting into the mud flats, and they have these highly sensitive nerves on these tongues, and they can sense where the food is. And so they're constantly probing, like dowitchers. For instance, long-billed dowitchers use the lake. There may be some short bills that come through like in July, I guess, in that time frame. But so they're constantly probing for food, and they're on that in the habitat, either on the shore or possibly resting, or where it's really moist, and their probing can provide them some sense of food supply. And then further out where it's wet, depending on the size of the bird and their legs. So for me, those are shorebirds. Willets also a long-legged bird. They're certainly a shorebird. Stilts are in that category. So there are a number of birds. They're not all tiny. And once again, I go back to using your field guide, looking at size, looking at weight, and one of the nice good things about the 7th edition of the National Geo is the updated range maps. You want to really pay attention to what birds may be frequenting the area where you're birding. And so range maps are important. There's a lot of things to look at when you're birding and you're just singling on new birds. I see Martin wants to chime in.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm going to talk directly to Nona. Peeps is just shorthand for sandpiper. So if we didn't make that clear.
So for me, the language, when someone says peep and I'm on a field trip, one of the first things I do is look at habitat, and then I look on their, if it's wet and if there's some birds on the shore, and then I know they're talking about peeps, but they're really shorebirds. Thank you, Martin.
Great, thanks. And thank you, Martin, for that clarification there. All right, more about birds on the lake. What are the smallest songbirds you'd typically observe on the lake bed interior?
Well, there's probably common yellowthroats, song sparrows, for sure. You might get more towards the Owens River along the banks. I've had blue grosbeak, ash-throated flycatchers, kingbirds, orange crown warbler, yellow warbler. But on the lake itself would be common yellowthroat and song sparrows.
Great. Okay, let's see some more questions. Rich, do you perhaps have data on bird numbers before and after returning water to Owens Lake?
Well, they're available. I don't have them. I don't have like any legacy reports or, in-depth personal bird lists that I would offer up with that type of critical data. But there's, Christmas bird counts are a fabulous way of looking at trends. And Audubon, National Audubon, you'd have to get on the National Audubon website and surf around a little bit, but they have data going all the way back. For instance, if the first Christmas bird count in Owens Lake might have been, I'm just going to throw out 1950, they would have all that data from 1950 through 1920. I don't know if they'll have 1920 posted yet, but for sure through 2019. So I would say for wintering birds, the Christmas bird counts is really good. A lot of the agencies have ornithologists, biologists on board, and they're constantly surveying birding trends and populations. And all of that data is on their websites because, they make that available to the public. It's part of their civic responsibilities to post their information. And so there are a lot of sources. So there's a lot of overlay. If you really get into that type of data searching, you're going to look at a lot of different reports and look at trends. eBird is citizen science. It's people such as myself and Martin and Mike and Nancy. We saw them earlier in the photos, recording birds as we see them. That we may not get into certain parts of the lake where the professional biologists, ornithologists may be able to get into and find other populations and bigger numbers. And I'm not sure those people always have the time to do posting on eBird. So there's a lot of data to look at. It's there.
Thanks, Rich. We're on the subject of data. So can you tell us, were the maps and graphs that you showed us, were they all from eBird? Yes.
Yes. And, so this is a PowerPoint presentation. I use Microsoft platform. I don't use an Apple. So I use PowerPoint, and you go into eBird. And if you have an account, you go in and there's 3 bars across the top. One is submission, the other is Explore. I use the Explore app feature. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you would want to find what state you're in, California. You want to find what county you're in. There's another drop-down box. You would say Inyo County or San Bernardino County or Los Angeles or Ventura, Marin, whatever. Click on that, and it's a drop-down box of all the species with a lot of critical data on distribution. And you can find all the data you want there and do a cut and paste if you want to create your own presentation or just use it there. You can print from there. You can do a 3-ring binder for yourself on your county. So everything is off of eBird on this presentation.
Thanks, Rich. Real quick, I just want to say we have about 10 minutes left total, so I'm going to give sort of a 5-minute warning, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. All right, I'm just going to get to a few more we have here. This is a good question, and maybe I'll toss this to both Rich and Martin. If you could make 3 stops in a day on Owens Lake birding, what would they be?
I'll start, Rich. I would just go to Boulder Creek and then take the East Road, and at the first opportunity drive out to what we call T36. That's the only part of the lake that's on the west side of the river delta, and there's 4 very large cells out there, and you can get quite a bit of birding done right there. Second place is back on the main road, over the river, on your way to Keeler, still on the main dirt road, what they call it, the main road for the entire lake. It loops all the way around the lake. And the first set of cells, you come to T30 on the left, T29 on the right. Those are also great hot spots. And if you hit those two, you can't go wrong.
So I would be riding with Martin, and I would have the same hot spots. But let me add another feature for birders and eBird. You can go into eBird under that Explore button, and you can get right into Owens Lake, and it has a number of drop-down boxes that a number of birders, either a red button or a blue button, and you can click on those buttons, and they'll show you the species that have been observed and submitted to eBird as a record. So if you're a new birder, I would suggest that you try to spend a weekend, and you could use eBird based on what species you might want to see. It's not that time consuming, but you do have to pay attention and take note of what button you're clicking on and where that location is, and it can lead you to some really interesting spots. When I go down to Owens Lake, I'm typically with Martin, but I do use eBird.
Great, thanks. Martin, how about I'll connect with you, and maybe I can share your recommendation with folks in my follow-up email next week.
Okay, great.
That'd be cool. All right, we're getting down, excuse me, just the last few questions. This is a really great question that came in. And Rich, maybe you can speak to this and your experiences in Alaska, but how does the melting tundra affect those nesting areas? Does it get saltier?
How does the mountain tundra?
Melting. The melting tundra affect the nesting areas?
So far, the permafrost in the in the Nome area hasn't really witnessed this mass melt off. It's still holding itself, and the tundra is about 3 feet thick, and then below that is the permafrost. And we haven't witnessed, a big wholesale melting that's at a critical mass that would excite people and raise a lot of warning flags. So the tundra, Nome, I'll try to make this quick. Nome ecosystem has 3 main roads. They go about 100 miles, anywhere from 80 to 100 miles into the interior. And you travel for the most part over alongside tundra. Sometimes you get into mountain valleys. We do take a day trip down into the northern limits of the spruce forest for songbirds like varied thrush. Once we had rufous hummingbird, alder flycatcher, those types. So, and in that area, you go through some glaciered valleys, and there is no real melt off really occurring right now. The days are somewhat warm, but that permafrost is 3 and 4 feet thick. And sometimes you see a very small section, maybe 4 or 5 square feet, where there might be some intrusion of heat, and the permafrost tends to buckle up and push the topsoil away. And the way you notice it is the topsoil is very black compared to when we get there. We hope there's snow on the ground. We want snow on the ground because it forces migrating songbirds specifically out of the willows. They don't have a chance to nest down low. So part of the strategy of going in late May and early June is you want snow, and hopefully get some snow. The snow hasn't been as much as past years. And I will say the Bering Sea in the harbor of Nome hasn't been iced up in maybe 5 years. So that's visible. That's my answer.
Thanks, Rich. All right, that's pretty much all of our questions that we have time for. Before I close, I just want to say, actually, there was one more question that was going to lead me into this, which is, what are the ecosystem restoration goals at Owens Lake? And this is a perfect question for us to ask the folks at Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, LADWP, and for the 2021 Owens Lake Bird Festival, we're going to have Colette Gall and Jeff Norden presenting about bird habitat management on Owens Lake. So this will be a great question to ask them. I'm going to hold this question and I'll bring it up then. But I want to let everyone know that we are doing a virtual Owens Lake Bird Festival. And we're going to have 3 different outings, virtual outings, over the course of 2 different days. And this will be happening on the normal weekend that we typically do the Bird Festival, which is the last weekend in April. This year it's April 23rd to the 24th. And we're going to have 3 different, like I said, 3 different virtual outings. The first one is going to be Owens Lake Habitat Management. And that's by, like I mentioned, Jeff and Colette from LEDWP. And then on Saturday evening, we're going to have photographing birds in Inyo County with Martin, who we just saw a bunch of his great photos. So please join us for that event because it's going to be just as good as this one. And finally, we're going to end it with Owens Lake's importance in Western Hemisphere bird migration. And that one's going to be presented by Mike Prather, who is a legend in the local birding community and just the community in general. So we hope that you will join us for the Owens Lake Bird Festival. Again, that's going to happen on April 23rd through the 24th. And you can learn more by visiting our website, friendsoftheinyo.org, and just click on our events tab and you'll find all of these events and all the virtual events that we offer. And I'm going to follow up in an email. We did record this presentation and it will be available next week. I'm also going to find some information or get some information from Martin about his recommendations on where to go birding, on the lake. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the event. Rich and Martin, is there anything else that you wanted to add before we end?
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for hanging in. I'm looking at the amount of people. We're still well over 100 attendees that have stayed on board to listen to the Q&A. So thank you very much. And I hope to meet all of you at some point. I've recognized a few of the names. I see Sally Walters. She's been on 1 or 2 of my field trips. So thank you for attending.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And thanks on behalf of Friends of the Inyo, we appreciate your support. Thank you, Kyle, for administering and keeping us square and straight and true and focused. You're an awesome young man. We appreciate all that you do for Friends of the Inyo.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you, Rich. A big thank you from Friends of the Inyo to you, Rich, for presenting for us and for having this event. Rich, was there something else?
Can I say one extra thing?
Please, yeah.
Everyone, I have a Facebook page, Yellow Bill Tours, and I only have a couple hundred people. If you're a Facebook user, please, would you consider liking Yellow Bill Tours on Facebook? Thank you. End of speech.
Great, thanks, Rich. Yeah, great plug. Rich, like he said, he owns and operates Yellow Bill Tours, and they are a business sponsor of Friends of the Inyo, and we are so grateful for his support and for his participation in the Owens Lake Bird Festival. Like he said, it's the community of birders that really make it what it is. So thank you everyone for joining us right on the dot, 8 o'clock. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, and we hope to see you at the Owens Lake Bird Festival. Again, go to our website, friendsoftheinyo.org, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.